I'll be short, not actually. It's been a long time since I've been in your beautiful, beautiful church. It hasn't aged a bit. As you can see, I have. Father Hessian was pastor when I was last here. What a great priest he is. And I'm so delighted to be here tonight to talk about one of my favorite people, Father Stanley Rother. And I give a warm welcome to members of his family who are here, his cousins. And it's interesting enough to note that his grandparents are buried in New Trier within this archdiocese. In order to speak about Father Stanley Rother, I need to speak about Mount St. Mary's University and Seminary, from which we both matriculated and were ordained from that seminary. I'll tell you a little story. When I was accepted for the seminary in 1955, there was an associate pastor in our parish who indeed was not a very sensitive person. He said to me, where have you been sent by the bishop? I said, to Mount St. Mary's. Oh, he said, that's the refugium peccatorum, the refuge of all sinners. When they won't take you anyplace else, they'll take you there. And I often thought of how insensitive he was. And yet, I was there 19 years of my life, and every day was a blessed day. So the hand of God. But in order to understand Stanley, or to come to an understanding of him, we really should look at Mount St. Mary's. Mount St. Mary's was founded in 1808 by two refugee priests, Father Dubois and Father Boutet. They were emigres from France, escapees from the French Revolution, and they wanted young men for the priesthood to study alongside of young men studying for other professions, medicine, because they saw the dangers of clericalism in France, where the priests were a state unto themselves, and that caused a great disharmony. In fact, it caused them all their heads. So they started this beautiful place on this mountain, and Elizabeth Ann Seton, the first American-born canonized saint, lived on that mountain for almost a year before she started her community across the road in 1809. But Mount St. Mary's, interestingly enough, is the second oldest Catholic university and seminary in the country, Georgetown University in Washington being the first, which was founded at the end of the 18th century. But Mount St. Mary's was a beautiful place in Emmitsburg, Maryland. And there were many, many families in Emmitsburg who had emigrated there from southern Maryland. They were the English Catholic families who came to the United States for religious freedom. They were great, great families. The Jordans, the Mattinglys, the Mudds, all those first Catholic families in southern Maryland came to Emmitsburg for further religious freedom, because when they left England and settled on St. Clement's Island in southern Maryland, they weren't really free enough to practice their faith. So they came up to Emmitsburg, and that's where this great school was founded, Mount St. Mary's, and that's where Elizabeth Ann Seton, the first American-born canonized saint, resided before she started her community of the Sisters of Charity in the United States. In 1858, Mount St. Mary's was celebrating its Golden Jubilee, 50 years, and Father McCaffrey was the president of the college and the seminary at that time. And he stood up to give his speech, and he said, why is it that this institution flourishes? It has had all kinds of financial difficulties. It has seen difficulties from within and from without. remember, it was just 3 miles below the Mason-Dixon line. So they had all of these Southern youngsters coming there to study. And at that time, the whole country was fomenting, preparing for the Civil War. And so that was in the midst of it. And he said, I'll tell you why we have still existed. The hand of God is on this holy mountain. And my dear friends, I cannot tell you how many times I thought of that myself. The hand of God was on that mountain. And Stanley was a young student at St. Mary's Seminary in San Antonio. And he could not seem to get the Latin, so he was asked to leave because they didn't think he'd make a good priest because he couldn't get the Latin. Now I don't think they know ego sum. They don't even study it anymore. That's how relative so many things are. But at any rate, Monsignor George Mulcahy was the rector, and who was also my rector when I went there in 55. And he said that he would give Stanley private lessons. He told his Archbishop of Oklahoma City. And Stanley came, and George Mulcahy saw the beauty in Stanley Rother, and he kept encouraging him and then tutoring him in Latin. Well, Stanley was ordained, and he came to the Mount, and I was in my 3rd year, and he was in his 1st. And I was ordained in 1960, and Stanley was ordained in 1963. But we kept in touch. He went to Oklahoma City, I went to Albany, New York. But after 5 years, my bishop sent me back to Mount St. Mary's as vice rector of the seminary. And George Mulcahy was then rector. And George Mulcahy taught me a great deal. I can remember on weekends, on Sundays, I would go to a state prison in Western Maryland and celebrate Mass for the prisoners. And on one occasion I came back to the seminary somewhat discouraged, and I said, Monsignor, I wonder what the use is of my going there Sunday after Sunday. Most of these men will end up in a prison after committing more crimes in Washington or Baltimore. And he said, what difference does it make as long as they remember the name Jesus Christ when they're dying? And that's all you have to do, is teach them the name Jesus Christ and how much he loves them. And that put a whole new light on things. And George Mulcahy had that intuition of realizing Stanley was a very blessed and good person. Excuse me. So he continued to encourage him toward the priesthood, and he was ordained. And he went to Oklahoma City, was in a parish. And then I went back to Albany. But we kept in touch with one another. And then I was sent back to Mount St. Mary's by my bishop, and Stanley volunteered for the mission in Guatemala. And he would send me different things like stoles, and he sent me a copy of a Bible that he had translated into a very difficult Indian dialect. Now remember, this was the priest who was asked to leave the seminary in San Antonio because he couldn't get Latin. And yet, God inspired him to translate the New Testament into a written language of that Indian dialect, which had never been a written language. And he was able to do that because God was with him. And then we kept in touch, and he would send me different little gifts, which are all in the archives now at Mount St. Mary's. And then in 1980, he called me. He said, can I come and spend a week at the Mount, that Mount in which Father McCaffrey said God's hand is on this holy mountain. Stanley had a great, great devotion to Our Lady, and every afternoon during recreation, he would be up in the mountain at that beautiful grotto, repairing it and keeping it up to date. And so I said, of course you can come back. And I was then rector at the Mount. And I had succeeded George Mulcahy as rector. And he came back, and I met him at Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. And I was at the gate when he got off the plane, and he began to tell me immediately the horrible, horrible things that were happening to the Indian people in Guatemala. It was a time in South America and Central America. If someone asked or sent more for picking coffee beans, they were accused of being communists. And in Guatemala, a paramilitary force would come into the village at night and stop at that person's home, take him or her out, shoot them, throw their body in a well, and then try to silence anyone else from speaking. Well, Stanley began to tell me immediately when he got off the plane these horrible things, and he said, if I speak, they're going to kill me. But if I don't, what kind of a pastor will I be? And Stanley spent the week at the Mount. And I would see him in the chapel. I would see him in the garden making the Stations of the Cross. I would see him climbing up the mountain to that beloved grotto, which he loved so very, very much. Incidentally, there was another graduate of the Mount who was quite extraordinary, James Walsh. He was a graduate of the college, went to Maryknoll as a priest, or to become a priest, became a priest, then was sent to China, where he became a bishop. And then he was arrested and accused of treason, and then imprisoned in solitary confinement for about 12 years. And his only desire was to return to the Mount to say his rosary at the grotto. And he came back to the Mount when I was rector, and he went, and we had a big dinner for him. There were 1,000 people there. The media was there waiting for him to excoriate the Chinese people. And he stood up and he said, I love the Chinese people. I have nothing in my heart but love for them. And I would return to them tomorrow if only they would receive me. But he died at Maryknoll and is buried there. But he was another great figure, heroic figure. But Stanley said to me, if I speak, they're going to kill me. And if I keep quiet, what kind of a pastor will I be? And his archbishop, the Archbishop of Oklahoma City, wrote to him and said, you're on a danger list. You really should think about coming home. And he wrote to the Archbishop and he said, the shepherd cannot run at the first sign of danger. Pray for me that I might be a sign of the coming of Christ for these good people. Well, at the end of the week, he said to me, and he told me this personally, he said, I have to go back and I have to speak. And that was the last time I saw him. He did go back, and I was reading the paper, the Times Union in Albany, where I had returned as a priest, because I was a priest in the Albany diocese, and I saw that he had been shot. But he told me himself, he said, they're never going to take me out and kill me outside and throw my body in the well. I'll put up a fight and they'll have to kill me in my room, which they did. And I went down sometime later to that room, and I saw his blood on the wall, and I was so angry at those people who had killed such a good man. And he did put up that fight, and they loved him so very much that they did not want anyone to touch his body until they had his heart, the Indian people. They wanted his heart to stay with them. And his father, Mr. Rother, had a difficult time with that. And Father Greg Schaefer talked to Mr. Rother on the telephone, because Father Greg Schaefer from New Ulm was on the other side of the lake at a mission. And he said, Mr. Rother, you've got to let them have his heart, because these people loved him. And I went down and brought his heart to its final resting place. And I have never experienced such love for a priest as those Indian people had for Stanley Rother. Now, I was all set to go to the beatification last summer, but I was ill. And so I could not go, but I watched it, every bit of it, on television. And the present Archbishop of Oklahoma City is a graduate of the same seminary from which Stanley and I graduated. They asked me one time, what did I remember about him? I said I envied the way he prayed. When he prayed, he prayed. As Teresa of Avila once said to someone, she was eating a quail, and she was going at it as though she had never had a bite to eat, I guess. And one of the sisters was disedified, and she said to the sister, don't be disedified. When I pray, and when I eat quail, I eat quail. But with Stanley, it was the same thing. At recreation, he would be jovial and talking, and then we would go up to the chapel, and immediately he would go into prayer. I envied the way he prayed. And that's the lesson he taught those good Indian people. Because before he went to that mission, hardly anyone was practicing their faith. And now you cannot go into that church without people being in there praying. And his relic is right there in that church. The lesson of Stanley Rother is this. For every vocation, many of us, all of us hopefully, will not see a bloody martyrdom. But there's a martyrdom in the vocation of marriage. There's a martyrdom in that. There's a martyrdom in the single state. There's a martyrdom in the religious state. Poverty, chastity, obedience. In the married state, it's the daily coming together and trying to see things in the same way. There's a certain martyrdom in that. There's a martyrdom in getting up at 3 in the morning with a sick child. There's a martyrdom in that. But the secret, I think, that Stanley taught us was prayer. He taught us how to pray. So many of us pray to tell God how to run the world. Well, the purpose of prayer is not to tell God how to run the world. He knows how to run the world. The purpose of prayer is to invite God into our lives so that all of us can become more Christ-like and more like Jesus Christ. That's the purpose of prayer. And Stanley, in my judgment, was very, very much like Jesus Christ. When I was in his presence, I knew I was in the presence of someone extraordinary. And the church in the United States should be very, very proud of this first martyr. And I had in my little chapel a first-class relic of Stanley Rother. And every day we venerated it, and I kissed that relic, and the sisters kiss it, and we pray to him every day through his intercession. And today, when we were venerating the relic after Mass at 5 o'clock, I said, I'm going to speak about him tonight. And if he doesn't take care of your arm, Sister Maria, I won't speak well of him. But her arm is coming well. She fell and hurt herself, and she's quite an elderly sister. But he was a great, great, great inspiration to so many people. And his family, so beautiful family. And he got that vocation from God, but it was nurtured in that family. And so much has to be done in the family. Our faith, as we have gone through these beautiful days of Holy Week, our faith is a precious, precious gift. A precious gift. We had 2 priests in Lafayette, Louisiana, the Voorhees brothers. Their mother was Jewish. She's a beautiful lady. And I spoke at the 25th anniversary of Father J. Voorhees. And his younger brother, Father Tom Voorhees, said to his mother one day, Mom, wouldn't you like to become a Catholic? He said, you listened to our catechism lessons, you brought us to church, you waited for us, you made sure we went to confession and the sacrament. She looked at him and she said, that's not my gift. Faith is a gift. And all you wonderful parents who are here tonight, encouraging your youngsters in the faith, because if we have the faith, we have everything. Stanley Rother had that faith, a gift by God, but nurtured by that family, that wonderful family in Oklahoma, and so many of the family here tonight. How fortunate I am to have known him so well. And I praise God for his life. I praise God for of his prayer life, which edified me and taught me so much about what prayer is, the inviting of God into our lives to help us to become more like Jesus Christ. Thank you.
We thank Archbishop Flynn for coming tonight. We would like to get a picture of anybody that is related to Blessed Stanley Rother in any way with Archbishop Flynn, right up here near the relic. So if you could come up for a picture, and then after that we'll form a line for the veneration. And we've also invited the Common Hope organization here tonight to share information about Guatemala. So you're welcome to meet back there. There's cookies and refreshments that the Knights are serving as well. So if we could ask all the Rothers or any relative of the Rothers to come up here.
My name is Marley Rother, and my husband was Clarence Rother, who was a, second cousin to Father Rother. Stanley Rother was a cousin that lived in Oklahoma and was a priest and got martyred, and he was in Guatemala, and we were down there in November to see it for his celebration, and Oklahoma City. Oh, all kinds of people here in the area are related to him, full of Rothers.
You're very proud.
Yes, very proud.
Is in Guatemala, and education is our main focus. We work with the whole family in healthcare, housing, and family development. And so actually, St. Pius sponsors 2 children through Common Hope and helps them to go to school.
Oh.
And then these are market goods that we have from Guatemala, and we sell them, and then the donations go to help Common Hope.
us this day our daily